In the Co-operative Republic of Guyana, the Guyana Defence Force stands as the guardians of our borders and protectors of our people. Some carry the scars of battle, others the weight of history. These are their stories, raw, unfiltered, and told in whispers until now.
Venezuelan jets would come across the border. Their F-16 jets will come and buzz our planes, and they wake turbulence on their jets, would want to turn our planes over, and they constantly would come and harass us. I got the plane down on the ground, and just before we were coming into land, to hit the ground, I pulled the nose up to land. And when I looked up in front of me, what I saw was a tragic. I was a young Army pilot. I was the first one that flew into Jonestown in the morning after the suicide happened, and the killing happened on the Saturday afternoon when they slaughtered the congressman and his people on the runway. He said, well, I'll tell you, those people on the ground have M16s, which are powerful rifles. And he said they will shoot you out of the sky. So they came running with a hammock. Two people were holding this hammock, and there was a body inside, and blood was pouring out to the bottom of the hammock. So I'm in this river, and I'm going, and then I looked up, and the weather was very bad. And when I looked up in front of me, there was a battleship, a Venezuela battleship on the horizon, and I was heading straight for this battleship. In this case, almost every day as a pilot, we were out there making a difference in terms of supporting the Army, supporting our troops. I wanted to make the point about everything that I did was based on the discipline and orderliness of being in the Army. Well, I grew up in lodge housing scheme, and spent a lot of time in the back dam, in the cane fields. But I also, as a young man, joined the Guyana National Service. And so the Guyana National Service was a foundation for my appreciation of issues of patriotism, dedication to the country. And so when I joined the Guyana National Service and started to get involved in military training and military discipline, I encountered Desmond Roberts. Desmond Roberts was a strikingly elegant GDF officer. In fact, I believe he was the first man that raised the flag at independence. And I met him at Chimachimari, and watching him in his uniform was an inspiration for me. And so when the time came, and I was successful in being selected for the Government of Guyana scholarship to be a pilot, and I had the opportunity to join the GDF. It was an amazing experience, having graduated from the officers training program, and the first time I put on the GDF uniform. It was an emotional and amazing feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself. But more particularly being a pilot in the Army, also because we were on the front line, we were there saving lives, we were there doing maritime patrols, patrolling our borders, saving people's lives, moving our troops up around the country. It gave me an opportunity to be able to appreciate my fellow Guyanese, the camaraderie, more than anything else I could ever imagine. And so the GDF afforded me the opportunity for adventure. It represented insight into leadership that I don't believe you would get the opportunity to understand unless you were part of something that was bigger than yourself. And I think the military was actually something bigger than myself. And so that is how I got involved in it. After I got the scholarship, I came back from studying in the United States, and part of my obligation was to serve in the Guyana Defence Force. And I saw myself serving in the GDF forever. It was just absolutely amazing at the time. The discipline, the camaraderie, the brotherhood, the family. And it actually ended up being the foundation, and it ended up, I would say, being responsible for almost everything I am today. And we will talk about where I am today, and you'll understand the enormous progress that was being made on the foundation of being an Army officer. But I wanted to make the point about the issue of resilience and teamwork that comes with being in the Army. I wanted to make the point about everything that I did was based on the discipline and orderliness of being in the Army. And I would encourage every young man, every young woman to take up that opportunity and join the Guyana Defence Force, and not only see Guyana, see the world, but basically to feel part of something that is bigger than yourself as you serve your country. You know, when I joined as a pilot, we were, at the time, Guyana had no navigation aids. And so we had to learn Guyana, learn every river, learn every mountain, learn every tree. So that as pilots, we had to navigate by what we saw on the ground. And we started to have to train to do this both by day and by night, because we were called in times to save people's lives, to go out in the middle of the night, land and jungle runways where we were putting bottle lamps to light these bottle lamps to outline the runway, coming down from the darkness into the skies onto these little narrow runways. And that was, in my view, one of the amazing things that we were doing when we were tangibly saving people's lives. You know, sometimes you're in the Army or you're in the police and you do your duty. In this case, almost every day as a pilot, we were out there making a difference in terms of supporting the Army, supporting our troops, and more particularly, saving people's lives. And that is one of the things that I found amazing being in the Army as a pilot. We were out there on the EEZ, patrolling the EEZ, looking for illegal fishermen who were there robbing our country of our marine resources. And so we were making a real difference every day. We were earning our keep. One All Year's night, we got a call from medevac. And so we took off at about maybe 7 o'clock the night, and we landed at one of the interior locations. And when we got there, unfortunately, they said the person just died. And they wrapped the man up in a sheet and tied him with a rope, and we put him in the plane. And we flew back to the airport to Timeri. And I hope the man's family is not listening to this. But so we brought him back to the airport, and the ambulance came to the airport. But the ambulance said, sorry, we don't transport dead people, we only transport. So you need to get the hearse from the funeral parlor. So they called the hearse, and we were waiting for the hearse. In the meantime, we took the man, and we put him under the step to the officers' mess. And we went upstairs with All Year's night, and we started to have a few beers, and we were, eating and so on. And then I believe a Caribbean Airlines plane might have been delayed at the airport. So a couple of the passengers knew some officers and came to the officers' mess. So we were in the officers' mess, and one of the guys came to me and said, Captain Gouveia, why are you still in uniform? And I said, oh, I just did this medevac. And when we got there, the man was dead, so we brought him. He said, where's the man? He said, who declared the man dead? I said, the people in the jungle. He said, the people in the jungle declared this man dead. He said, where's the man there? Now, this man was under the step for like nearly 3 hours, right? And it was raining. So the rain falling through the step and wetting this man in the sheet with his rope. And I didn't know this man's a doctor. See, the man went in, picked up his bag, and take the thing, what is called the thing around his neck, stethoscope. And all of us now walked down the step behind this man. We went to open up, pull the man out from under the step, open the rope. And when the doctor started testing the man, the doctor said, this man's alive, right? Why, I could have died. Anyway, they came, rushed the man to the hospital. The man is probably still alive today, right? And I say, never again this is going to happen to me. About 6 months after, I got another medevac to Marbaruma. And we landed, and the same stupidness had come and tell me the man dead. I said, listen. Y'all prove to me this man dead, right? So a Cuban doctor was there. The Cuban doctor did everything to prove this man dead. I took a thing, we scraped the man bottom of his feet to make sure his foot wasn't moving and whatever. Man dead like a door. We tied the man up in the sheet, tied with the rope, put it in the plane. So me and my co-pilot came back 3 o'clock in the morning, the thunderstorm, bye. And then suddenly, my co-pilot nearly jumped out of the plane. The man get up. So we knew this man was dead. The man had rigor mortis. The man from the bumper rung in the plane, right? The man body did like this and jerk. Boy, hey, both to be one jump out of this plane. I said, so if you wanted some of the challenges we have, and you asked me about this thing, this is my stress relief. Many times, so I had to play with this throughout the flight coming back. A lot of times when we get into bad weather, and flying in a jungle, we always had to operate by some particular rules, and those rules were we never get below the safety altitude in clouds. So anytime if the safety altitude going into the Mazruni were 7,000 feet, and it's 7,000 feet, 7,500, we cannot be in the clouds below that altitude, so you have to be above it. And so sometimes if you fly in and then you see a hole through the clouds and you dive into the hole, you always got to have an escape route to get out back. In case when you get down, you can't continue on. And so many times, sometimes this would happen to us, and we get down, and when we get down below the cloud and you look forward, then the weather starts closing in front of you. And when you turn back, then the weather closing behind you. And now you're surrounded by mountains and you got to get up. And so this is when you need this thing. Because you now got to just, you got to circle, and you got to circle, and you got to hold a tight circle to make sure, because now you're in the clouds below the safety altitude, you're trying to get back to altitude to get up. And so stress relief and things that will keep you calm and safe. I had one pilot who always had a chain around his neck, and he had a bullet on the end of and every time we get in a difficult situation, he's put the bullet in his mouth, and he would suck that bullet until we get out of difficult situations. So different people deal differently with their stress. And so in the Army gave me an opportunity to a lot of times do things that was way beyond the call. Another time I was going to Lethem, and I had 18 soldiers on the plane, and we were flying into Lethem, and we heard on the radio this call for a medical evacuation. So we had this call I'm listening to the radio. We are flying on. I'm up at 10,000 feet going into Lethem, and I heard the Ministry of Health, a nurse on the radio was screaming that they needed this medical evacuation. This man is going to die. And sometimes I was a little maverick in the Army, and so I decided I'd go and investigate this. So I cut the power, dive into a place called Paramakatoy, which is a small village in the middle of the mountains. So I landed. Now, when I landed with 18 soldiers, I can't take off with 18 soldiers, so we had to shuttle them to Kato. But I landed, and the people came running to the plane. I said, "Where's this man that is sick?" They said, "Sir, sorry, the man is dead, and they have him down. The family took him down to this hut in the valley, and they're all there with him." So I turned to the nurse. She says, "The man dead." She says, "Sir, he's not really dead, but they figure that they want him, if they will die, let him die here. They don't want him to die in the plane." So I said, "Let's go and see." And they said, no, the indigenous people are going to be very upset. I said, "Let's go." So I marched down the hill with the soldiers behind me, and the people protesting that we were going to disturb what was culturally there. So we got to this hut, this Benab thing, and it was very dark. And they said, "We can't go in." So I told the soldiers, they said, "Open the curtains." So when they opened the curtains, myself and the nurse went in, and the nurse went and said, "Sorry, he's alive." So I told the soldiers, "Pick him up and let's take him back." And the people were angry, and they were protesting at Paramakatoy. We walked him back to the plane, put him in the plane. The soldiers had to protect the runway now from the people attempting to stop the plane. I took off, and this man, when I got to the man's head was this big. He was bitten with a levaria in his eye. And so his face was this big and black. And I could understand, they thought he would die. So anyway, I flew him to Ogle, flew out the plane, went back, picked up my soldiers, and went on to Lethem. Never saw this man again. About 20 years down the road, I was there with Desmond Hoyt. And Desmond Hoyt had a meeting with the people in the village, and we were in this school. And at the end of the meeting, I'm sitting there with President Hoyt at the time, and this man came walking up, and he came with a lady and 2 children, and he came and he stood in front of me and he started to cry. And so I'm looking at him, and Desmond Hoyt looked at me. He said, "What did you do?" I said, the man said, "Sir, you don't remember me?" And I said, "No." He said, "I'm the man that you came and you extracted out of here, you saved, and today this is my wife and this is my 2 children." But he was blind in his one eye. And so those are some of the things that the GDF, being in the GDF and being a pilot in the GDF, afforded. There were times when we had children born aboard the plane. And then there was this other particular instance where the people actually named this young boy, this baby, after me. And my name is Gerry Gouveia. My first name is Gerry and my last name is Gouveia. But they named the boy Gerry Gouveia Bihari. His last name is Bihari. He's still alive today and he lives in Camarang. So I got a call this night again. I was sitting at the Pegasus with some friends having dinner. We got this call for the medevac. Flew in there. It said this lady was pregnant for 7 days and she was having difficult labor. They brought her out in a hammock for 6 or 7 days through the jungle, got her to the runway. And when we got there, they said the lady can die or the baby can die. But we got to get the child to the city. So we hustled, we got them into the plane, brought them back. I dropped them off and went on back to the Pegasus to dinner with my friends. And again, many years after, I was there with Donald Ramatar, I think in 2011. And when I'm standing there, a man came to me and he brought this young boy. He said, "Captain Gouveia, do you know this boy?" I said, "No." He said, this boy is 17 years old and his name is Gerry Gouveia Bihari. So Donald Ramatar looked at me, he said, like, "Who did you trouble?" I'm innocent, wasn't me. But, so here's a young man that lived. Here's the man at Paramount that lived because of the GDF, because of what we were doing as young officers in the GDF, saving lives and making a difference. And, we also put our lives many times at risk. When we flew into the jungle, Venezuelan jets would come across the border. Their F-16 jets would come and buzz our planes, and they wake turbulence on their jets, would want to turn our planes over, and they constantly would come and harass us. But we would continue going in and supplying our troops. And every time we would get in there, they would bring their F-16 jets, and they would come and they would continue to harass the GDF. But I must tell you something that the GDF stood strong on, and we at no point in time did we ever blink. We continue doing our job. We continue doing it with a lot of resilience and dedication. And I would say that Guyana is a safer place because of the GDF. So one day I'm going into Mabruma and the weather was very, very bad. So I dived down onto the river. And when I thought I was in the Winey River, if you understand the geography of Guyana, I thought I was in the Winey of Guyana. So I got right down on the river, and the trees are passing the side of the skyvan. And what I didn't realize that I was in the Brima River. And the Brima River heads right into Venezuela, into the Bay of Venezuela. But I thought I was coming out, I would come out in the Winey, to the mouth of the Winey, which would allow me now to turn back and get to Mabruma. So I'm in this river, and I'm going. And then I looked up, and the weather was very bad. And when I looked up in front of me, there was a battleship, a Venezuela battleship on the horizon. And I was heading straight for this battleship. And I saw men like dashing and running for their guns. And I turned the skyvan, like put it on its wing and turn and snap it around. And I sat there with my waiting to feel the impact. Luckily, we never heard it. We never felt it. But it was the closest I believe we came to an encounter with Venezuela, where they were actually, but because the weather was bad, and I did not expect to see a big ship like this in front of me, because I thought I was coming out in the Winey, when in fact I was coming out in Venezuelan territory, in the Bay of Venezuela, with one of their battleships sitting in front of us. So we've had many things like that happen to us along the way. But it's all part of being in the Guyana Defence Force. I would say to you that I actually became the chief pilot of the Guyana Defence Force and one of the instructors. So I was training pilots. I was helping to contribute to the developing the capacity of the Army Air Corps. And I got very involved in search and rescue. It became a passion of mine, so that I was very concerned that our national search and rescue systems left a lot to be desired. And so I started to get very involved. I remember the first time for me was when we had a Skyvan that disappeared with our Director of Civil Aviation at the time, Robbie Roberts, and we launched the search and rescue. And when we finally found the plane, it was a tragic, emotional time. But for me, it was always that we were not quick enough, we were not organized enough. And every time we had a search and rescue, we were scrambling. And so over the years, I became very involved in the administration and operations of search and rescue, which I did. I did it for when we had one of our iconic pilots, a guy by the name of George Gransult, that disappeared. He was really one of our pioneers, and he disappeared. And we moved the entire Army and the Guyana Airways at the time into the Cameron area to search. And those are very, very significant things we were doing at the time, and helping to give pilots the comfort that if something happened to them, that we are going to be responding within 15, 20 minutes, so that you're not giving people, because people could be alive on the ground. So those are some of the issues. We did training. We had a lot of training with the infantry. We looked at some of the operations that happened at Jonestown with the Army. As a young Army pilot, I was the first one that flew into Jonestown the morning after the suicide happened, and the killing happened on the Saturday afternoon when they slaughtered the congressman and his people on the runway. I was awake in the morning at about 3 o'clock and told that we have to do a medevac to Port Kaitumo, which is where Jonestown operated. And so I took off, myself and another pilot, and we were flying in. And nobody told us exactly what had happened at the time. And so there was this U.S. Air Force plane that was coming into Guyana, a huge transport aircraft called a C-5. They were bringing like a hospital in this plane and so on. And the pilot called out to me and he said, if you're going into that area, have you ever flown into combat? And I said, no. He said, well, I'll tell you, those people on the ground have M16s, which are powerful rifles. And he said they will shoot you out of the sky. And so when you get there, you need to get over the airstrip very high, because as we said that they used to do in Vietnam. So you get over the airstrip very high, you cut your power, and then you dive the plane straight down. And just before you hit the ground, you pull up and land. And so that you don't give the gunmen the opportunity, you don't give them a target. If you went into a normal approach, right? So, of course, I've never done this, but I thought this is fantastic adventure, and now I'm in the middle of a movie. I didn't know what I was going to meet on the ground, but I dived the plane in, and because I wasn't briefed, I had no idea what I was going to see. So as I got the plane down on the ground, and just before we were coming into land, as I hit the ground, I pulled the nose up to land. And when I looked up in front of me, what I saw was a tragic, it looked like clothes, but it was the bodies, the congressmen, the media people, they were shot, their head was burst open on the ground. And so we landed, and when the aircraft came to a stop, this white guy came running up to the plane, and he said, Jesus Christ, because nobody briefed us, said, you don't even have a stretcher in this aircraft. And in fact, we didn't. We just took out the seats. And then they came running with a hammock. Two people were holding this hammock, and there was a body inside, and blood was pouring out to the bottom of the hammock. And she it was a lady. Her name was Jackie Spears. Jackie Spears became a congresswoman, actually. So they brought her to the airplane. Now we were sure that she was going to die, because if you see, the blood was just pouring out of the hammock. And we put her into the aircraft quickly, because we recognized that this was between life and death now. And we took off and brought her back to the airport. And when she landed, the same big cargo plane was coming in with the medical people. They came out and looked at her. They said in 10 more minutes she would have been dead, because she was losing blood that fast. I stood on the ground looking at the lady, and she was a beautiful woman. And she looked at me, but days, and they took her away. Never saw her again. And I always wondered what happened to her. But she was the congressman's secretary at the time. She actually went on to become a congresswoman, Jackie Spears, as she a Democratic congresswoman. And she replaced the congressman in his constituent in the United States. So about maybe 35 years after I was in the U.S., I was in the Washington, in the Congress. And I asked one of the congressmen, a guy by the name of Rangel, if he knew Jackie Spears. And he said, yes, her office is right upstairs. And so I went up to her office, and I saw her staff in the office, and I asked for her, and they said, we'll get her for you. Right? Because obviously my name might have been a name that she spoke about. She'd been looking for me, and I'd been looking for her all these years. Because she wanted to know who is this pilot saved her life. And so she came back, and she came over to her office, and we sat in her office for maybe 2 or 3 hours, and we talked or reminisced. Unfortunately, she actually blamed Guyana for what had happened. She felt that if we were more vigilant, we could have stopped it from happening. But she and I talked that day, and she wrote a book called This Is Not the Life I Ordered. And she actually wrote in the book, thanking me for saving her life and so on. But her life as well was actually quite traumatic. Because when she was shot up all over her groin and so on. And they told her she can't get any children. And she said many years after, some of her friends took her to the beach, and she said that she met an amazing man. And she got married to this guy, and she got pregnant. And then she had to be bedridden throughout the pregnancy. And they told her not to get pregnant again, and she said she got pregnant again, and now she's bedridden again. And one night she's in bed, and her phone rang. And when she picked up the phone, this was like about 7:45 the night, they said to her husband was just killed by a drunken driver. And the guy was a young brain surgeon. And as she was telling me the story, I said to her, when did this happen? And she gave me the date and the time. And it was the exact time that I had actually crashed in the jungle that night. The exact same time at 7:45 on this date at this time. And for all intents and purposes, I should have died in that accident that night. And I'm just saying that story to say to you, sometimes, the Catholic Church, they actually banned the discussion of predestiny. God said if you have free will, there's nothing like predestiny. But I actually believe that, the concept they say that many are called and few are chosen. Well, that night I should have died. And that night maybe he should not have died. And God got a serious way sometimes of giving and taking. And God saved my life that night. In fact, that night, 3 times I should have died. I should have died when the plane was crashing into the trees. I should have died when I took out my flare gun to shoot the flare, because the whole jungle was coated in fuel, and the flare gun went packs. It was a dud. It was cold because I haven't used the flare gun for a long time. And if the flare went off, it was going to go off as a ball of fire and come down at the ball of fire, light up the jungle. And then when it didn't go off, I went to get my matches and I attempted to light a fire with some leaves. And then I caught myself. I said, what the hell am I doing? And so that night, while that was happening to me, it's amazing how people lives across the world and could connect again. And so at the same time I was going through that challenge, she, the one that I saved 35 years before, was actually going through her challenge and losing her husband at the same time on the same day. And so it was quite amazing. But being part of something that was bigger than yourself, going into Jonestown itself as well, when we brought her the body, we brought her out and went back to bring out the bodies and so on. But it was all part of your military obligation to do the things we were doing. So we were moving the bodies, we went into Jonestown, and there were thousands of army troops in there bagging the bodies and so on. But to be in the middle of it, it was kind of surreal. But you were there because you had a duty to perform as a GDF officer. And those are things that would rest with me for the rest of my life. And it bonded me in brotherhood and friendship with men and women that I served with back then, that even today And you're looking at 45 years, 50 years ago. That the brotherhood and the sisterhood is still very, very tight when you get together. So that's what the Army does. The Army gives you a family outside of your biological family, one that is strong, and then the commitment to country. And you really have that sense that you are making a difference in your country, you know. So I would really reach out to young people. And I think the Army have to do a lot more in terms of marketing itself, and the virtues of what this Army, what being an Army officer is. Whether you're an Army officer, you're a private, you're a sergeant, it's part of that structure that make Guyana strong and make Guyana, will keep Guyana safe. I wanted to make the point to you that when we were flying across Guyana, we had no GPS, there was no technology. And so they had one navigation aid that was based at the Chedijagan International Airport at the time, but it only extended to 50 miles. So outside of 50 miles, you had to basically, we went to all rudimentary navigation. So you draw a line between where you're leaving Ogle Airport to say Camarang, and you draw the line and on the map. And so you look at how the line crosses the Demerara River, how it crosses the Essequibo River, how it crosses the Peroni River, how it crosses the Mazuni River. And so when you take off from Ogle, you set the heading when you measure it in the map, and you hold it. And then if the weather is good, so when you pass the Demerara River, you see how the wind blows you according to the line. And then you make a slight correction in the direction. And you get to the Essequibo River again, you see how the wind blows you. And because you're flying high, and you need to get high to get above the mountains. So you have to know the terrain, you have to know the height of the mountains. And as you pass the Mazuni River, you look down, you see the exact bend in the river, you know how the wind has blown you. And then you have to start this descent. And we did a step down process. And all of this we're doing by the seat of your pants. All of that we are doing with this. Then we are doing with this. And as we step down onto these mountains, we have to look for the breaks in the mountains, because when you pass the Mazuni River, you got to be above 7.5, and then 3 minutes afterwards, you know, you could come down and so on. But what you're basically looking for is little signs, little savanna patches, little house in a corner in this direction. And invariable, when you get into the area, if you're lucky, you break out overhead Camarang, or you will be left or right, and then you have to now go and search for it. So it demanded a tremendous a sense of key observation to learn Guyana, like the way you learn your neighborhood. If you're living in Lodge or Alwaystung, you know your neighborhood. As a pilot, you could close an experienced pilot eyes, and you take him any part again in the plane, you open his eyes, you look down, and in 5-10 minutes he'll tell you where you are and how you could get back to civilization from the air. But that was a time when we had no technology. And I was able to live through the transition when technology became the foundation and safety of flying in Guyana, with the GPSs. When the GPS was introduced in the first Gulf War, and after the Gulf War, they made it into a commercial entity so everybody could have a GPS. And the first GPS came to Guyana was amazing for us, because now we could actually follow the GPS lines, and it gets you exactly where you're going. So we started to again get very innovative. So we would go to a runway, we would take a coordinate at one end of the runway, take a coordinate at the next end of the runway, and so that gives us a straight line. And then we project another coordinate in the middle of the jungle and give us another straight line. So we would fly this straight line in the dead of the night, in 0 visibility conditions, and able to land in the jungle. So we started to use technology in ways I don't believe it was meant to be used, because it was meant to basically get you from Georgetown to Camarang. That gets you from one end of the runway to the next end of the runway. But that's what we were doing, and the GDF was actually pioneering these things. It was amazing. It was an amazing time that we had to use every skill and every bit of your intelligence and your innovation, which takes me to when I left the GDF. And I got in and I took all my skills to brought it into the private sector. Again, innovation. Being innovative was the name of the game. Being brave and being creative in creating the economic activity that was needed, but with the same level of military discipline and precision that we did back in the Army. So when I got into the private sector, we started to do all the medical evacuations at night. We started to help with search and rescue. And by the time I got into the private sector, very shortly after, the GPSs and technology really became a big part of the aviation industry. But what I found is that the transition from military to civilian life, to me, was seamless. Notwithstanding the fact that I also did karate for many years as a young man. And so the discipline and dedication of being a karateka and then moving into the military and then coming into the private sector. And as I got into the private sector, I started to anticipate where Guyana will go. So, you know, there was once a very famous ice hockey player, and he was on television, and somebody said, you know, John, you're a great ice hockey player. He said, I'm not a great ice hockey player. I'm a fantastic ice hockey player. And they said, why? He said, well, a good ice hockey player keeps the ball with him all the time. Excellent ice hockey player anticipates where the ball will go and wait for it. And I would say when it came to being an entrepreneur, I would have to give myself that credit, because I remember back in 1992 when I actually came into the private sector, we were in a very, very bad state. Our economy was bad. We had no money. The private sector was now starting to be rebuilt because the private sector was completely destroyed. And so to get into the private sector and think that you could make a difference, I had to have a lot of resilience and a lot of bravery to invest your money and so on. But I actually looked at Guyana when we now got to democracy, and I believed that Guyana was going to be a place to be reckoned with in the Caribbean. And so when I started the Roraima part of it with the planes, we started to support the mining industry and help in the economic growth. And then tourism, nobody was thinking about tourism. So when I went and I developed Arrow Point Nature Resort, there's a lot of people saying to me, what are you doing? And I realized that if I had this plane, I have to be able to fly people to Kaieteur Falls. I have to create the jobs for this plane, the work for this plane. And then we had to encourage tourists to come to go to Kaieteur Falls and go to Arrow Point and kayak and mountain biking. And I was actually anticipating where Guyana will go. And when I developed the two small hotels, again, if we bring groups into Guyana, they need hotels to stay in, they need the planes to fly in, they need the boats to go to Arrow Point. And all of that kind of thinking and innovation came from my military experience, from the things we had to do to make a lot out of a little when I got into the private sector. The innovation, the dedication, the commitment, the camaraderie. It was an easy transition, but I would say it made Roraima Airways one of the most dynamic and growing aviation companies, because it became a conglomerate of travel and tourism services, employing 400 young Guyanese. And then we developed the ground handling operation at the international airport. So today they handle American Airlines, they handle Conviasa and Avianca and so on. So, but a lot of that was because we never believed that anything was impossible. We ever believed everything was possible. And so we were able to be contributing to Guyana's development at a time when a lot of people were not seeing it. I remember when we had a $300 billion economy back in 1992. Today we are $30 billion. But back then, you basically was keeping your fingers crossed. But again, it was anticipating where Guyana will go. And a lot of that came, I figure, from the discipline and the expectations of being a GDF officer. Service to country is one of our highest callings. And it's about putting yourself beyond the call of duty, always. And to the young men of Guyana, I think the GDF is more than a career, really. It's a place where character is built, where relationships, where leadership is fostered and enhanced. And so I really want to encourage across Guyana people to really look at the Army as a place to give back, where patriotism become something tangible you could touch and feel it every day. And so I think that's one of the messages I would like to leave. And I think to say this as well to young people, that, you know, every day of your life, you're being judged, whether you know it or not. People are watching you and people are judging you. And you're gaining credits or you're gaining debits. And you don't even know it sometimes. The way you behave when you're with your friends, you're having a drink. And these things come back to either help you or haunt you in your life and your future. So when I was going to start with Rima Airways, for example, I didn't have any money. So I'll tell you the story, but again, this is the resilience and the ability and the GDF to say, we are going to get it done. So I wrote a bank in England and I asked them, I wanted $500,000 to start with Rima Airways. And they said, yes, but you need to get a corporate guarantor. So I wrote a couple companies, and I wrote Oh My Gold Mines at the time was now starting up. And the board of directors of OMI was Clifford Reese, Donna Ramatar, Haslem Paris, Eddie Loku, 4 Guyanese, and 3 Canadians. So I wrote them and asked them if they could sign this guarantee for me to get this loan to start this company. And they called me back after the first board meeting, and they said, you know, Gerry, we can't give you this guarantee, but here's a check for $500,000 go and buy a plane, but you'll have to fly for us for the next 15 years. Now, these men were Clifford Reese, and you know Clifford Reese, Donna Ramatar, Haslem Paris, and Eddie Loku. And I'm saying that sort of tell you that even without my knowledge, these men would have been watching me coming up, looking at, and they had to now endorse and guarantee to these Canadian investors that if they supported this young Guyanese man, that he's not going to run away with his money. And so when you don't even know it, people are judging you. So these men had to stand in judgment of me. These were not my friends. These were big men. But they had to stand in judgment of me and give and give an endorsement. And that's how Rima got started. And when and over the years as well, I got into the private sector, and a lot of my peers in the private sector. Then I got elected to the presidency of TAG, of the Tourism Association. Then I got elected as the president of the Chamber of Commerce, and then eventually as the chairman of the Private Sector Commission. But what I think one of the greatest honors in my life is when President Ali, when he was elected in 2020, called me to the cabinet room and said they wanted me to serve as their national security advisor. And because during all my years, I did a lot of training at the National Defence University and the NTSB in Washington, D.C. and so on. So when the time come, all my experience were able to come into one place as the national security advisor. But again, President Ali, President Jagdeo, Donna Ramatar, they had to make a judgment call of a person that they believe could take this job on. And so today I hold a position as a national security advisor since 2020. And I believe it's one of the greatest honors in my life. But again, it comes back to tell you, people are watching you and people are judging you all times. And sometimes you're with your friends and you thought, let me let my hair down, let me relax. Sometimes your friends are the ones who have to stand in judgment of you and make a recommendation for you one way or the other way. And so, but in the Army, because of the brotherhood and because of the camaraderie and the discipline, I think it gives, if you understand what it is meant to be, it gives you that platform to behave yourself at all times, and more particularly when nobody's watching, or when you think nobody's watching. Do you stop at the traffic light 3 o'clock in the morning when no police is there? You should stop at it, but that is a lot of self-discipline. When you believe people are not watching you, they are watching you. So you're out at Palm Court with your boys and you're drinking, behave yourself. Always be very conscious about your character, your reputation, and so on. I would say that in a big way, that is what was responsible for what I've been able to accomplish. And it was always looking at your back yourself. Don't have somebody else looking for you. You look at it because people are always looking at you and judging you. You know, this is something very important. I sat at the opening of the bridge on Sunday. I don't know if you guys were there. But I sat in the audience and I looked at the cultural show that was presented to the Guyanese at night. And what I saw almost became very emotional for me, because it was a fusion of Guyanese, African Guyanese,
Indo-Guy. Y'all discriminate against me. Know what you want? They didn't know Portuguese dance. So I saw the Amerindians, I saw the Chinese. But you know what? It was amazing. And I believe that social cohesion and really an appreciation for each other and each other's culture and each other's religion, what really made Guyana fascinating. And I sat there on Sunday night and I watched this fusion of Guyanese. And I watched when they came out to do the One Guyana dance, when they actually came out together. And when you would feel an emotional eruption because of looking at that, you know that they get love for this country. And when all these years, the things I've been doing, the contribution, the sacrifice, many times I almost lost my lights in the middle of the night, all helping to build Guyana. When I sat there on Sunday night, I felt it was all worth it, and I would do it again.